Yes, me.
Tēnā tātou katoa e te whānau. Kei te rongo pai koutou i ahau? Mōrena tātou. Tuatahira, tēnei nā te tukumihi atu ki ngā ringaringa me ngā waiwai o tēnei o ngā kaupapa o Whānau Ora. Ko koutou nā tēnā. I mihi ana kia tātou katoa i runga i ngā tini āhuatanga o te wā. Kia tātou katoa ko whakarauika mai i runga i te kaupapa, i runga i te karanga o wā tātou tamariki mokopuna. I am really nervous right now. What I want to do is, I really have the honour and the privilege today of being able to launch Te Kawa o Whānau Ora. But first, before I do that, I thought I might give you a bit of a whakapapa as to the genesis of how this kaupapa came about. About 5 years ago, I started getting my knickers in a twist about a whole lot of things. I trained as a clinical psychologist in New Zealand, and I had been probably out for a good 5 to 7 years practicing at the time. I was also fortunate enough to be the Whānau Ora manager for Te Whānau Apanui Iwi. I became really disillusioned right throughout my training as a clinical psychologist, but also when I come out as a fully fledged psychologist. Nothing sat right in my puku about any of the mahi that we were doing. I started to feel like everything I was doing was about keeping our people sick rather than helping them be better. And I could never put my finger on what it was in my puku that was not right. So then I set out as a researcher to go and find out what it was that was missing from psychology that was not helpful for our people. And so I found a massive body of research that talks about, in psychology we call the common factors. So there's a lot of research out there that asks the question, well, what is it about psychology and psychiatry that actually helps heal our people? And so I'm reading all these books, and I discover a couple of things. One, when people come in to see us to get support, what I learned was that 80% of success that occurs with any whānau that comes in for support has got everything to do with them. It's got everything to do with the belief they have in their ability to change, their motivation, their internal resources, education, their external resources, their community and who they're connected to. 80%. 15% has got to do with what we call in psychology the therapeutic alliance. That, to us, is whanaungatanga, connection, the wairua stuff, the ngākau Māori stuff that nobody ever gets to see, but that we feel. Now the 5% of that has got to do with all the models that we're taught at university. And this pissed me off, right? So I spent 10 years of 100% of my time at university learning about that 5% of models. And this is the institution that reigns supreme in Aotearoa and completely monopolises well-being and mental health in Aotearoa. That 5%. And then it dawned on me as I was going through all of this, hey, that 95%, the client that comes in, the therapeutic alliance, ko Whānau Ora tēnā. And that's when I learnt what was missing for our people is everything that we do. And it validated for me why I was feeling the way I felt and why I never felt like I could connect with psychology in Aotearoa. And it was because Whānau Ora makes up the 95% of the heart and soul of change of our people. But this country is hell-bent on valuing the 5% that is only taught to us by America and the UK. And then I was also at the time, as I said, managing contracts and things for Te Whānau Apanui. At that time, I think, might have been around 2013, 14, I'm going to meet with other contractors, other providers, to have a kōrero about Whānau Ora. So this is where my nickers get in a twist some more. I'm sitting there talking about Whānau Ora. Then we have these Pākehās coming up to us. Oh, yes, no, we do Whānau Ora. We've been delivering Whānau Ora. Okay, what is Whānau Ora? Well, you know, it's that philosophy of outcomes, and there's the 7 outcomes that we talk about. And then I thought, given that Whānau Ora for us is our heart and soul of change, we need to do every bloody thing we can to protect it, because we're so good at what we do, it's in our DNA, people are going to try their hardest to tear it down. And at the time, we didn't really have a protective mechanism in place for us to unite in a universal language about what Whānau Ora actually is for us. And unfortunately for my kaimahi at Whānau Apanui, they were used for guinea pigs, for all sorts of things, for Kiri's little plans. And yeah, so I started to really think about how is it that we can start ring fencing what it is that we do. Kahau te pātai ki wā tātou kaiarahi. What is the difference between what you do as a Whānau Ora practitioner and what a social worker does? What's the difference between what a social worker does and what a psychologist does? What is the difference? What makes us unique? Oh, I don't know. We feel it. It's the feeling. So that wasn't okay for me, I don't know, because we know in this world that everything's got to do with evidence-based research. So I set out to go and find out what that was. And I was really, really fortunate to have been given the privilege to spend time right across the motu with over 150 kaiarahi and over 35 providers who gave of their time so that I could come and sit down to listen, to really find out what is it that makes us unique in terms of our practice. And I'll never forget the time, I think it was at the first ever Whānau Ora conference, I rongo atu ahau ki ngā kōrero a Te Kōka a Tariana Turia. And she talked about it's always about the journey and not the destination. And I thought that was really important because for us we need to capture what that journey looks like in terms of our mahi. More so that we can unite as a pack when we need to. And at that time, we didn't really have the language to use. We knew it in our ngākau, we knew it in our heart what it was that we done, what we do, but we couldn't articulate it together. So off I went, and the beauty about going into to have kōrero with all of our kaiarahi, I reached a point, I don't know if you, in research there's a term called data saturation, and that's when you go out and all you're getting is the same answers, right? So no new data is coming out. We reached that point really quickly because once we were able to sit down and really ask the questions of our kaiarahi, they could tell us within a heartbeat what it was that they did was different. And so this started off as being a competency framework for Whānau Ora practitioners. It grew into something so much more than that, which I'll get into very shortly. But we started talking about what are the competencies involved for a kaiarahi. And I can see so many faces here today that we're all part of that kaupapa. So mihi atu ana kia koutou. And what came back to me, and this is because, right, this is another thing that annoys me. Competency models, accreditation frameworks, and all these things are always pushed on to the practitioner. Always. So it was really important that whatever we design is designed in the way that the Whānau Ora philosophy works. Mā te whānau. Mā te whānau e arahi I tōna ake huarahi. He pērā anō mō ngā kaiarahi. So when we want to understand what it is that kaiarahi do, what do? Like whānau, we go to kaiarahi and we ask them. And the closer you are to the whānau, the more you know about things. And I'm just The closer you get to the bureaucracy, the less you know. And I think it's really, really important that we put that out there. Ko ngā whānau, me ngā kaiarahi, rātou mā on the front line, they know. Ka pai? So kia kaha tātou te whakarongo atu ki a rātou, and that's what this whole model was all about, listening to them, because they're the they don't get caught up. They don't get caught up in the crap of contracts and bureaucracy. They're there to do the mahi, and ko te aroha te mea nui. And so they came back to me and said, well, if this is a competency model for us, first of all, we don't like that word, because that makes us scared. Because as soon as we see competency and hear competency, we think you want to take something away from us. When we hear audit, we think you want to take something away from us. When we hear accreditation, ka wehi mai tātou katoa. Kiri, you need to think of a Māori view of doing this. And actually, if we as kaiarahi have to do this, then so do our managers, so do our providers, and so does the commissioning agency. These accountability structures, everything that we do, everybody should be looking at their work through the lens of a Whānau Ora practitioner. And while I thought that was beautiful, because what it did do is it started to transform the way we viewed business. We've all been conditioned into behaving in a Pākehā way. Hierarchy. The boss says, do as I say, not as I do. And ka mahi atu ngā mahi. Te kawa o Whānau Ora, e ai ki ngā kaiarahi? No. We all have an accountability to one another. We all do the same thing. We must all look through our work through the lens of a kaiarahi. And so if my manager, I'm their whānau. They need to look at me as though they're expecting me to treat my whānau. The same with the commissioning agency. So that's how we ended up with, so first what I'm going to do, we came up with 6 key values, 6 key po, which are all here. Homai te paki mo wēnei mea rawera wātu. So the 6 key po that define this whole kaupapa started with mana motuhake. Mana motuhake, tēnei. I'm going to stand by them because we need to give all of these things some aroha. So the kaupapa of mana motuhake, as you know it, right, is autonomy, self-governance. We don't have to explain what mana motuhake is, but it's actually you in your position knowing where your mana lies. So when you're working with your whānau, the mana doesn't sit with you. At all times, the mana sits with them. As a manager and a provider, the mana doesn't sit with me. It sits with my kaimahi because they're closer to the whānau. And as a commissioning agency, mana definitely doesn't sit with me. It sits with my partners and my collectives and the providers because they're speaking on behalf of their kaiarahi who are speaking on behalf of the whānau. So the further away you get from our whānau, the less mana you have in this space, and it's about acknowledging that. We've been too caught up in a Pākehā model of ego. I'm the boss, so what I says goes. This is dismantling all of that, right? So part of this kaupapa, it's our decolonisation framework for Whānau Ora mai. All whānau must be at the centre of all Whānau Ora work. And when I say whānau, it's really important that you understand from your perspective who your whānau are. Who do you serve directly? Right? So we're talking about service. Who is it that you're serving? As a Whānau Ora practitioner, I'm serving the whānau that come into me for help. As a manager, I'm serving my kaiarahi, my staff. As a commissioning agency, I'm here to serve my whānau who are the partners in the collectives. So I think I just keep that. And that at any time, we can decide our own journey. For our whānau on the ground, if they want to pull out and change direction, kei a rātou te mana. He ori te mō ngā kaiarahi, he ori te anō mō ngā partners. Ko tā mātou mahi, he whakarongo, he mārama. Tuarua, ngākau Māori, well, this is my favourite part. These are all the things that we so hard to define, yeah? And I listened to this Pākehā academic talking about how difficult it is to define Indigenous parameters. You know, everyone, Pākehās want to measure everything. measure this and measure that. We want to quantify this and quantify that. And then this Indigenous psychologist said, well, have you ever considered the fact that maybe your measures have not evolved enough for our intelligence? So how about that? And tika tonu e ngā kōrero. Just because you can't measure ngā kau Māori, that just tells me about how sick you are. Hey, that's what that is. Whānau, ngā kau Māori, this was a really big one, and this is the stuff that we feel, right? This is stuff that we can't talk about, but when we know we're getting whānau with us, there's just that connection, that wairua connection. It's our authentic and natural ability to show and feel love for one another, compassion and empathy for whānau. Now, aroha, when we talk about love, everyone is like, oh, that's just a real pansy word. I roto I te ao Pākehā ai. Engari rā, that research, this is Pākehā people research I'm talking about, and the people that did this should really be Māori. But they talk about aroha, but they talk about it in their flash words like authentic, meaningful connections and things like that's aroha to us. It's the capability to establish deep and meaningful relationships with everybody, centred on a mutual goal. I used to work in Pāremoremo prison. The first thing we do, oh, kia ora whaia, these fellas, kia ora whaia, oh, hey, cuz, so you're my cousin from Ngāti Bro. Straight away, connections built out of respect without even having a conversation. All of the psychologists, pull them all in, you're not to address her as that. So our ability to establish connections based on whakapapa and based on aroha is really important. Our ability to listen and respond to what is not being said. Now that came from Professor Mason Jury. But we're so good at doing that, eh? Pa ko te wairua I roto I te rūma tēnā e kōrero ana ki a tātou. Ko a tātou tipuna kei te rongo ki te puku I ngā wā katoa. The next one. Tūmanakohanga, here. So, tūmanakohanga, when we asked our kaiarahi, what is the difference between what you do and everyone else, they said, oh, we're not into crisis management all the time. Everything that we do is about aspirations and dreams. Our whānau don't know how to dream anymore. Our job is to help them figure out what those dreams are. And if it's just incrementally growing their capacity to dream some more, because it's been taken away from us. But it's not also just about my ability to help my whānau that I'm working with dream, it's about me dreaming as a kaimahi too. Where can I go in my mahi? What do I need to learn? So it's about being solutions focused. Hey, we got a whole lot of negative Nancys in our people, negative aunties and negative, hey, ko te mea nui, we got to be half glass full, not half glass empty about anything and everything that we can achieve. It's the capacity to aspire to a life of prosperity, health and abundance. And this doesn't just apply to the whānau that we work with, eh? So as a kaiarahi, as a Whānau Ora practitioner, this is what I hope for my whānau, but it's what I hope for myself. As a manager of Whānau Ora services, that's what I hope for my kaiarahi. That's what I want for my kaiarahi. It's what I want for me. And as a commissioning agency, it's what they want for their partners and their collectives and themselves as well. Tūhono. This was a biggie. Where is she? Over here. The most beautiful face that I saw when I walked in. When I think of tūmanako tūhono, there you are, ringa ringa. This is Te Aroha Whānau Ora here. I came in and had a really cool kōrero with Te Aroha Whānau Ora, and to me, our kōka over here epitomises what tūhono is all about. She talked about, we have to have 1,000,000 hats all at the one time. Put this hat on and have to do that, then walk out here in this hat, and I've got to do all these hats at the same time. I've got to connect. My job is to do anything that I can to connect my whānau with anyone and everything that is going to help them be better. Nothing more, nothing less. The ability to create, facilitate and maintain connections for self, whānau, organisation and whānau ora. And when I go back to talk about the research, the 80% is all about the client themselves, we intervene in that. We intervene in that place. We help our whānau establish connections with people when they don't have them. It's the ability to develop internal and external relationships, and we need to get better at that. So I'm putting that out there because our egos get in the road. We need to start loving one another, whānau, not competing with one another. Ngā hua. And so this is a biggie. I roll my eyes all the time with commissioning agency about ngā hua, but it's important. Ngā hua is defined as the fruits of something, and right from the beginning in Whānau Ora, we had a really heavy, we're really heavy on the philosophy, and we're really heavy on the outcomes, and I think the commissioning agency and Whānau Ora as a whole, we are excellent in this space. So we're able to ensure the mechanisms involved in achieving our outcomes and goals are appropriate and sound, that all work with whānau must be aligned to a particular outcome and or goal. And like I said, this is not just kaiarahi for whānau, this is managers for their kaiarahi, waka for partners. And te mea whakamutunga, which is my favourite, matataki. Kaiarahi said, you know, there's one thing being an advocate, anyone can be an advocate. In Whānau Ora, we require fierce advocacy. So it's not just your normal advocating, it's fierce, and we don't take no for an answer. Matataki is the point of a war party. They're the most fierce of all and lead everybody through. And the way we conceptualise this is we've got our matataki who are opening doors for our whānau to come through, to clear the pathway for them. And that's the not taking no for an answer. So e hoa ma, that is just the first introduction to the 6 key values that came out from our kaiarahi. And they apply to everything, right? Providers, the commissioning agency, all of the above. Now, it gets better. What we also started to talk about was, tika tonu wene, but what about clinical competencies? And what about technical competencies? You know, you're working with these whānau with really complex needs. You can't just give them a whole lot of aroha and nothing else. So what we've done in these key po, we're addressing the 95%. We're addressing that. We can do that with our eyes closed. But the 5%, we are under system controls that we have no choice but to subscribe to. Contracts. Wēnei mea katoa. We don't want to lie anymore, right? We know half of us are being a little bit dodge in how we do our contracts just to suit the Pākehās, right? We do it all the time, but we don't want to do that anymore, okay? So this framework allows for us to be free Maoris, to put there what is important to us and what is of value. So this is where this comes in. Kauwairunga me te kauwairaro. Kauwairunga is top jaw, kapai. It's connected to mātauranga Māori. Everything that we know about what we value about being Māori. So these key po, I muri ahau, koina ngā mea katoa. It's defined in Te Kawa o Whānau Ora as a set of enduring traditional values, characteristics, personal qualities centred on a Māori worldview necessary to carry out all Whānau Ora work. It represents a Māori code of engagement and acknowledges our natural style of engagement, inherited by our tipuna, the natural way we do things. Kauwairaro is how we've tried to conceptualise technical skills, right? So we all know, from a practitioner's perspective, there are some things that we do need to learn, right? There are some competencies that we need to get a bit better at, especially for our really complex needs whānau. And heri te tonu, our providers are the same. We need to get better at policies, we need to get better at systems. He pērā anō ki te commissioning agency. So what are those technical things that we are required to do that don't come from the Crown telling us how it gets done, but that comes from our own framework? So this is what we ended up with. So we go from a competency framework for Whānau Ora practitioners to a full ecosystem of accountability that waka, providers and kaiarahi all need to be accountable to. But also, it sets up for us what I call a pātu wata for the way in which we look after ourselves, the way in which we engage with ourselves, and it also sets boundaries for the way the Crown should be engaging with us. So right across we've got Kawairunga, which I'll go into soon, and each have tikanga, right? Kawairaro are the technical competencies. And I tell you what, I've written down there, whakapapa whanaungatanga, aroha manakitanga, wairuatanga. And you know why? Because I think those concepts have been bastardised by Pākeas, ministries, left, right and centre, who write it but don't know it as far as they could bloody see it. So my thing is if we can carry out all of these the values in all of these ka puta mai te whakapapa me te whanaungatanga, aroha, manakitanga and wairuatanga. Pākeas can't do that. No Pākehā can do that. They can say that they can talk whakapapa, but you tell me how you show ngākau Māori, and you show me how you can do tūmanakohanga. They can't. So that's tripping them up. Now, so this is how I try to conceptualise the whole thing. Now, waka will always and forever be known to me as te paumatakana. And there's a reason for that. Te paumatakana is a sentinel tower that we have in a pā. And the role of the sentinel tower is to see, you can look at Pāre Moremo, right? They got their own sentinel towers. And the whole purpose for that is to see threats coming in, people escaping, and all of that. It's the same function. So the role of te paumatakana here and of waka is to see and scout for outside strengths, weaknesses, threats coming into our pā. Our pou, they set our pātu wata. This is our protection framework for us. This is the universal language that we can use when people are starting to come for us. We pull together. This is what we are. Within that pā, front facing, it is entirely up to you how you operationalise te Kawa o Whānau Ora. And I'll use the likes of te Tihi o Ruahine, Waipareira, who have their own tikanga, their own kawa, that they use within themselves. This is about when we need to go to war together, we have got a universal language that we all subscribe to. We call it different things, right? So we all do this in Whānau Ora. All of us do. We call it different things depending on where we come from, what our tikanga are, and how our iwi works. And we all have different pās. So for us, this is te paumatakana, your own provider, your own organisation. You'll have your own pā. And it's entirely up to you how you want to articulate that. And so for some of our whānau i te āhua wehi as soon as you get a new model, everyone wants to roll their eyes, and what does that mean for us, and how much work does that mean, and how much does this cost, and all of that. Well, it costs nothing because you're doing it. So all this does is validate every single thing that you're doing. And when we have to go to fight because Willie Jackson's taking our money away from us for Whānau Ora, we can go to him and say, no, this is our boundary. You don't get to step foot in here until we say you can. These are our rules. These are our tikanga for engagement. That's how we can use it. So, this is very complicated, and I'm not going to bore you with all of this. But these are the key. We call these things tikanga in the Kawairunga. This is for kaiarahi. So everyone's got one of these: kaiarahi, provider, as well as waka. The Kawairunga stays the same for everyone. So mana motuhake is that you've got to be whānau focused. And when I say whānau, remember, it's the people that you're serving directly. You must be collaborative, and you need to understand where the mana lies. Never with you. That's what you need to understand. It never lies with you. Kapai? It lies with the people that you're serving. Ngākau Māori, being empathic, instilling trust, having interpersonal skills, communicating effectively, altruism, cultural commitment, giving time, responsibility, unconditional compassion. See, we can articulate these things. We know what it is. Tūmanakohanga, self-development, having an aspirational mindset, cultivating innovation, solutions and strengths focused. Tūhono, building networks, balancing stakeholders, collaborating, being a community leader. And while you're being a community leader, everybody is here, having your integrity in your own home is important too. Ngā hua, ensuring accountability, being action-oriented, planning and aligning, driving results and outcomes, adaptability, matataki, courage, being persuasive and advocating fiercely. Tērā, kauairunga, he orite mo te katoa. So these tikanga are for kaiarahi, managers, providers, as well as the commissioning agency. Kauairaro, that changes depending on the different role. So these are the technical competencies necessary to carry out that PO. Not because so-and-so contract says we have to do that. No, this is our own platform and we're saying, okay, yep, this is what we want and this is how we're going to manifest that in a system and in a policy. Heri te tonu, so once we did this with Kaiarahi, we went around and did a pilot with our partners and providers as well, to ask them to put together what a kauairaro looks like for them. I'm just going back here because this is my vibe, right? I am a practitioner. But what I wanted to talk about in here, down the bottom, these things were really important. You'll see there's not many things here, right? And that's because it's entirely up to you and your organisation to determine up to you and your PA to determine what clinical expertise are important for you and your community of the time. We don't want anyone to be fully fledged psychologists. We don't want you to be fully fledged psychiatrists because then you're focusing 100% on your time on that 5%. So put 5% of your time onto the 5% that works, which is this kauairaro stuff. But no, straight up, because we know those of you who are managers of contracts, you get bugger all money if you're not a clinical FTE. Hey, all the people, the 5% people get all the money, and the 95% people don't. So this is about us recognising and realigning the way it's meant to be. The 95% gets 95%, and the 5% gets 5% of energy. We're just realigning to what it's meant to be. E heri te tonu mō waka. So one of the things that we're embarking on with the commissioning agency, who very soon will be getting very courageous themselves, is we want to begin by, from a commissioning agency perspective, to understand from our whānau, which is our partners and our collectives, where do we sit in relation to Kawa o Whānau Ora. We want to understand how we are tracking along these key PO and these key tikanga, and then we want to come back to you and be vulnerable and be open and honest about what you've said about us, and then what commitments we're going to make to developing ourselves in this space. I think I'm just about finished. So I want to finish off here. Some of the applications, right? This here, whānau, is a one-stop shop for everything. And I mean that because already we do case management with Te Kawa o Whānau Ora, performance reviews, we can do recruitment, HR, it's an accreditation framework, it's a competency framework, it's an every bloody thing framework, and it's as simple as hell because we do it already. Te Kawa o Whānau Ora was built as an enabling framework for everyone. It is not there to tell you what you're doing wrong. It is only there to help everybody develop as a PA. Now what that means for everybody here in leadership spaces is you've got to drop your ego and decolonize the hell out of yourself so that we can do this properly together. Nobody in a I'm serious, like nobody in a past sense, right? We cannot afford for us to be scrapping with one another. We can't afford for that to happen, and as soon as you start competing, that's your ego talking. You've stopped serving and you've stopped being responsible to your people. So the challenge now for you all individually is to ask yourself, how colonized am I? You really do, because we all are. We really all are. And you need to look in the mirror and have that argument with yourself so that you can get angry at yourself rather than other people for calling you out about it. But start being really open. This is going to take a long time. I am of the generation, the kohanga reo, kura kaupapa generation, that I didn't have to fight for anything. I was born into knowing how important I am in this world. And that was off the back of the blood, sweat and tears of my parents' generation and generations before him. But that means we have a stronger challenge ahead. For us, my generation, picking up that baton, what are we going to do with it? We need to, as my husband would say, run the ball up the guts and be unapologetic. I have been conditioned into being unapologetically Māori, and I refuse to compromise. I was born into not having to compromise how important I am in this world. And it's your fella's fault, because you sent us all to kohanga reo and kura kaupapa to be better, and to know better, and to do better. This is disruption. This is why we were put here. This is why we were put in kura kaupapa. This is why you fought for us to have all of these things, to do this and to disrupt. So let's get back to our pā ways of living. E te iwi, tēnā tātou katoa.